you guys haven't already cloned the repo, we're going to go ahead and work out of that. So please do so now. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. All right. So before we even get into the project, and like I said, if you guys are ever stuck or need me to backtrack or anything, let me know. I'm not going to be mad if you pop in and ask me for anything. So this is what the project's going to look like. Before we get into the project, I am going to have you guys get a little bit familiar with the API that we're going to use tonight. The biggest part, and I'm going to post this in the after hours channel so you can pull it up. So we're going to be using one that's called random user generator. And this is really cool because someone's gone to the effort of making all of these lists of people, and they have like email, contact, profile picture, a lot of information about them. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll get to see kind of what the JSON looks like for the information. And so someone has been awesome, and there's just like insane amounts of users in here, and you can go in and get a lot of info about their name, their email, what's their birthday, what's their phone number, what's their, profile picture. So this is going to be a really cool opportunity for you guys to practice your JSON skills and see immediate results after you parse a JSON. I don't feel like the gigs project or a lot of what we've done this week has been like instantly gratifying, and that you've written code and then been able to see it happen right away. And this project will do that for you. We'll make a change in your model object today, and then we'll go ahead and hit run, and you're going to see that information pull up right away. So really cool way to make sure that you're doing well with parsing your JSON and that your networking methods are working. So yeah, let's go talk through this a little bit. Every time that you guys use an API, definitely find somewhere that says documentation. And documentation is just a fun developer's way of saying, this is how to do stuff. And so once you come in here, there's going to be information that's useful to you in every API documentation, and there's going to be a lot of information that's not useful to you. We're basically looking for some sort of JSON object where we can see what it's going to look like when the data is pulled back. So we've got this right here. And then we do need some sort of, what should I say, like a endpoint, some sort of base URL. This is similar to the one that we're going to use. Basically what this one's going to do is send us up to 5,000 users with one request. We're not going to use 5,000. That's a stupid amount of people to get. We don't need to do that nearly that many. I think we're going to do about 20 total, just because we don't need to see that many people. So let me go ahead and send you guys the base URL that we're going to use, if it'll load.
So Mitch, on some documentations, it's not like, I guess, obvious right at the top of where the API should be, and they may have multiple API endpoints. How do we, I guess, decipher which one we should use for the base URL?
So I'll teach you how to just like a foolproof what method to do it. Let me go ahead and put this in really quickly. There might be a mistake in this code snippet I'm going to send you, but we can fix that later. But that's the base URL that we're going to be using. So Spencer used Insomnia a little bit today and has used it throughout the week. I think Insomnia is a fantastic tool for you guys to check before you even run any Xcode, before you write any code in your projects. It's a great way to come back in and just make sure that you've got the right endpoints. So if you're not already, what you can do is you can come into Insomnia, and if you guys don't have Insomnia, not a big deal. You can watch me do it here. But you just come over here and hit add, do a new request, and then just give it a name so that you can refer back to it if you need to. Insomnia is really cool in that you can save all of the requests that you've made. So we're just going to call this one, I don't know, like random users is probably good. And then, so usually in the APIs that we're going to use going forward, they are a get-only API, which basically what that means is they don't want you to post whatever data you're making in your app up to their API. They're just going to give you a bunch of information, and then you can use it however you want to. So Xcode is cool in that anytime you make a network request, it's going to actually default to GET. It's going to make sure that it's planning on doing a GET request. You can see right here, Insomnia is based on it as well. But if you ever need to make like a post request or a put request to update something, we'll have to use like an enum and change those, kind of like we've done this week. A good thing to know about tomorrow is that you guys will only have to use a GET request. You're only going to be pulling information down. You don't need to do like today with the gigs project. have to post any information or alter it in any way. You're just going to get information from an API tomorrow. So that's what we're going to do tonight. So to answer your question, Austin, what I always do is I will just mess around with a couple of URLs that have some endpoints. And so this one that I'm giving you is kind of similar to the one that we saw in the API right here. Requesting multiple users. This one lets us generate up to 5,000. I just kind of altered this to do a little bit fewer because we don't need nearly that many. So if we just do, hey, we want the format to be in JSON, we want the results to be just 15. I'm actually going to change it to 20. If you look on the right-hand pane, we're going to get 20 in unique user profiles. And it's going to be kind of hard to see at first, like what all this information is. But we're going to talk about parsing this out and how to make sure you get the information that you want out of it properly. So does that kind of help, Austin, so that you can go forward getting the right base URLs at least?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay. And then I encourage you guys to do that as well as you're appending path components and doing different things to add on to your base URL. Come and test them in Insomnia first before you write the code out. And that way you'll ensure that you're going to get the right information, because Xcode's not really intuitive in that it gives you a real-time response. You have to run the app and make it produce or print some sort of response to see anything about it. So in short, Insomnia is your buddy here. So this is the API that we're going to use. We're going to come back to this in a little bit and talk about how we want to get this information out of the JSON. But first, let's go ahead and just set up the project just like we always do. So I'm going to pull up the project here. I've kind of actually already organized it for you guys. And going forward, I think this is a really smart way to start approaching your apps because it will keep them clean. If you're committing often and putting them on GitHub, your future employers will come back to your code and see that you're a very organized programmer. And that is hugely critical because, as you can probably imagine, there are some programmers out there that aren't super organized and do things like we kind of talked about massive view controller, where they'll write a lot of code into one file. We're going to be more organizational and prepared with the way that we approach our apps. So I like to divide them up into kind of folders and categories. Let's go ahead and tackle the main storyboard first. I've done one of these type of reviews with my previous TL group, so William and Donovan and Austin will kind of recognize this, but as we go forward in these Thursday night review sessions, I want to talk through a lot of the steps with you guys to make sure that you're making the right decisions and you're processing what's going on. So I'm going to ask you a question about what to do next, and I'm going to wait to hear back before we do a lot of steps. And I think that will help you guys kind of think through your thought process of how things are supposed to be done. I cleared out the main storyboard. I'm going to set up the basic part just because you guys probably don't know exactly how we're going to use this API yet. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull out a table view controller. So we'll come over here to the objects library, get a table view controller, and pull that guy out. Drop it in here. Okay, sweet. Awesome. Now, if I were to run the app right now, what could I expect to see on the simulator?
Nothing.
Yeah, it would be a black screen. Do you guys know why?
The initial view hasn't been set.
Exactly. So one thing we can do, and this is just good practice in all of your apps to keep them organized, we want to first embed in the navigation controller and then make sure that we make the navigation controller, which we don't actually ever see, it's kind of just like the clear card stack. We want to make sure that that's the initial view. So sweet, now that we load this in, if we were to run the simulator right now, we would see a bunch of blank cells. And you guys have seen that before multiple times. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull out what's going to be a detail view controller, just on the right-hand side of the table view. Okay, cool. And then we're actually not going to be creating it all just because we're going to get that random list of users from the API. So all we're going to want from here is we're just going to want to click on a cell and be able to see information about that random user. So we're going to do a show segue into that. Sweet. Okay. So we're pretty solid there. I think that kind of sets up the main layout of what I want it to be. It's going to be a really simple app that we work on today, mostly because I'd rather that you guys get a lot of practice parsing JSON and seeing it pop up in your app in real time than having to make like a super complicated app. I think this will help in the long run. The only other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a navigation item. You guys will see why later, but it's gonna have a title, and we are gonna take advantage of this title later. For now, we're just gonna put user in the title, because later on we'll want the user's actual name to populate here in the navigation item, and that will help us identify them. It also makes for less work. You'll see later we don't have to drag out a label and make an outlet if we want to just display something in the title. The title is a great place for us to show off some information without having to do a whole lot of work for it. All right. The other thing that we're going to do really quickly is we're going to make some Cocoa Touch files to make sure that each of these views have some code that we can write into them. So I'm just going to make sure I'm at the top level of the project. Well, not the top level, but the inner level of the project. I'm going to hit Command-N, and then that'll pull up the new file menu. We'll make a new Cocoa Touch class. It really doesn't matter which one you make first. I'm just going to start with the table view controller because we made that one first. And I'm just going to call it users table view controller. It's going to show our list of users that we're going to have in the app. And then, yeah, we'll just go ahead and drop it into the Xcode project files. Sweet, so we got that there. I'm going to make another one. And this one's going to be for our detail. So this one's going to be UI, view controller. And then this one's going to be user detail view controller. We'll go ahead and put that into the project. Cool. And then if you can see here, I've kind of categorized things based off of what they actually are. These three files that come with your Xcode project, your app delegate actually does a lot of the under the hood code for you. It's good to not mess with the app delegate too much just because it's a lot of like Apple's pre-written code to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Your assets is for specific images and things that you want to display. And then your info plist we'll talk about a lot when you get into frameworks. It's kind of like, it kind of runs the show of your app. It kind of manages permissions and things like that. So it's really good to not mess with these too much unless you know what you're doing. One thing to note, if you ever put your info.plist into a folder, your Xcode project loses track of it. So I actually fixed that for you guys, but if you ever see it says something about the info plist file has not been found, you can click at the top level Xcode project up here, and then there should be a little bar that says choose info.plist, and then it'll just let you select it from a list. It's really easy to find. But I did that for you just so you guys had one less thing to do. But let's go ahead and categorize these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift select both of these files. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to make a new group from selection. And then these are going to be our view controllers. So that way we've got like a really clean, easy way to reference these files that we'll be using. That way you don't have to scan through every time. You'll find later when you're making projects that have 5 or more view controllers, it'll be really kind of a pain to look through and try to find each one. Okay, now that we've made these files, we got to make sure we class them in the storyboard. Let's go class those really quick. And my poor computer is working so hard. Okay. Wait, so make sure we class the right ones here. Let's go into the identity inspector, or sorry, the class, I think it's called that. Yeah, the identity inspector. And then this one we called users table view controller. And then this one we called user detail view controller. One last thing to do whenever you're setting up any project really, especially ones that use table views, but we want to always make sure that we give a segue and identifier right out of the gate. So if you click on that segue we made from the cell, it's best to be as explicit as possible with what it does. So I'm going to say just user detail. So that way we know the segue is identifying the user detail. You'll be really happy that you set those in advance when you're making big projects so that you don't have to go back through and make sure that they're the right name. And then we're also going to make sure that we give the cell a custom name, an identifier. And I'm just going to call that user cell. And the conventions that I'm kind of following here as far as like naming and such, they're definitely what the Lambda instructors have taught us to do. To my knowledge, they also follow what we call MVC and also MVVM, which are just kind of like the general patterns where you organize how your code is run and built. That just kind of like the modern developer world uses as well. So anyways, that's kind of why I use those specific like user cell the way I referenced it right there. All right, awesome. Is everyone good so far? This is fairly common, stuff that we're used to here. Sweet. If you guys are ever stuck and you need me to stop, let me know, but we'll just go ahead and power through here. Okay, so let's go. We know that we'll need a model object. We're going to have definitely a user object that's going to have some information about these random users. They're going to have, you know, a phone and an email and a name and different information that we're going to want to display somehow in the app. Definitely right out of the gate, I know that I'm going to want, kind of like your contacts app, I want to see someone's name here and maybe be able to select it and come in and see more information about them. So that's kind of the general outline of what we're trying to accomplish here. To make that happen, let's go ahead and make a model file. So another thing, Command N. This one will be a Swift. We really don't want anything inside of it because it's going to be, you know, a custom struct that we're going to make. And I'm going to call this just user. User's a good indicator of what it is. If you ever go into someone else's project, especially someone that's been developing for a while, most of their models will be as short, you know, and as like Lego blocky. I like to call it like a Lego block as possible, just like the bare bones, minimum basic part of the app. So this is going to be our basic part of the app is our user file. While we're at it, let's go ahead and make sure that we organize it. So I'm going to do a new group from selection after I right click. And then I'm just going to call this our model so we know where it lives. Okay. So before we write any code, before we decide, you know, what needs to go in this at all, let's go back to the JSON and take a little peek at what kind of information we can expect to get back from the API. So, and I guess actually instead of looking at the API itself, we might as well just look at Insomnia, because Insomnia is going to have the same amount of information for us as well, and kind of in an easier format to see. Okay, so if we were to send this request out right away, we can see that the first thing we're going to get back is a key value for results. So if I were to approach this and start figuring out my model object, how would you guys start out identifying the key parts of this user object that we're going to make? First off, what's the very first line that we do whenever we create a model object?
Struct user of type codable.
Yeah, so we're going to make a struct. It can be a class too. We'll talk more about like why structs and classes are, you know, have trade-offs of their own. We'll just stick with a struct because it's going to be more simple for us. And I'm just going to do a struct called user. I'm going to call it user results. User result is probably fine. And you guys will see why here in a second. So we got user results, and then Austin, you said codable, right?
Yes.
Okay. Another cool thing too, you can always put codable and it will do both. If you're just getting and you're not sending up any information to an app, you can also just use decodable, because all we're going to be doing here is pulling down information from the JSON. Codable is both. Codable is decodable and encodable happening at the same time. It doesn't really like affect our app too much to use decodable versus codable in this sense. I'm just going to use decodable just for the sake of easiness and identification. Okay, so now that we've seen the JSON, how do we know what to put in this model file here? What do you guys think?
It'd be like let of type string and let title. Oh, you're doing the results first?
Yeah, we're definitely going to do the results first.
Would you do results of type array?
Yeah, and you can see right here, good point, Austin, there is a bracket. So we know at some point, and I guess if I'd probably just do one result, we're going to see just one single user, and it'll be easy to define what it is. But there's going to be a key value for results, and then there's going to be an array that starts here. And then the array finishes at some point. It looks like it probably finishes right here. So what we can expect is results is going to be sort of the name of the array. And inside the array, there is a set of dictionaries. So that's what these curly braces indicate, is there's some sort of dictionary in here. And the dictionary is just like a bunch of strings or a bunch of int values that are inside this array. So you guys are right. First thing we need to do is we need to use that results object, that results key value. So I'm going to say let results be of some sort of array. There needs to be some sort of array that exists. And it's going to yell at us because we don't have a lot of information yet. But when we come back into this JSON, whoops, I did the wrong one. I need to get Insomnia. When we come back into this JSON, we start to see information about a user. So this is a really good time to say, this is the stuff inside here is going to be what comprises our actual user struct. So I'm going to make a new struct, and I'm going to say this is our user. This one's also decodable. Oh, so this one's also going to be decodable. And now that
I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's up?
Do you mind just repeating why you would use decodable as opposed to codable again?
So either one is fine. Codable also has encodable inside of it. It's just a double protocol. So there's decodable and codable. Decodable takes information from a JSON and puts it into a Swift format that we can use, also Objective-C. And then encodable takes Swift or Objective-C code and converts it into JSON. So in this case, we're not putting anything back onto an API, so I don't need to conform to encodable or codable. I could, it really wouldn't affect it, but for the sake of the app, all we need to do is decode. Does that make sense?
So basically, only because we're only getting.
Exactly. We're only taking JSON information and turning it into Swift. That's the only reason why. We could totally come in here and do codable. That works. You guys will see later. We'll monkey with it. It'll work either way. Just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to do decodable here. Okay. So now that we've made this user struct, we've seen inside of the request that we've made, there is like an object inside. So there's an array of objects, and each object is comprised of a gender, name, location, time, all this information. So that's going to be our user. So that we could say this results that we're getting back is an array of users. You guys with me so far? Doing okay? JSON's hard when you first start out. Today's going to help a lot for you to see like how to manually parse. There are lots of tools online that will parse JSON for you.
So you don't have to say in the struct user decodable, you don't have to put let name, string, let title, you don't have to put all that. You're just putting it in that array of results.
We're going to do that right now, actually.
So we have to write out that whole, if they have like a whole list of stuff like that, we write out each individual one.
Nope. So this is the beauty of Swift in general. I think there are a lot of programming languages that allow for this, but you can get whatever you want out of JSON. So there's APIs that are going to have hundreds of lines inside one single object. You guys will see this tomorrow. But maybe we only want one or two things out of it. You're totally free with, codable to get what you need out of the JSON without worrying about having to store all of this information about a model object. So if you only want 2 strings out of a 300-line JSON, you totally can, and you won't have to worry about the other 298 items that are inside that JSON. So we're going to go into that here in a second. We were just doing the very first top level here. We were taking care of, hey, we're getting some results that are an array of something. Does that make sense, Austin?
Yeah, I just got ahead, sorry.
Okay. So now we can totally do that here. We can come in here and get those properties that we want out of that JSON, depending on what we want to use in our apps. So like I was saying, there are plenty of different, softwares online and things that will parse JSON for you. You can literally copy JSON and put it into some softwares that you can find online, and that will parse them pretty accurately for you, like surprisingly accurate for you in lots of different coding languages. The reason, and Spencer kind of spoke to this the other day in the chat, I think it was yesterday, the reason that we discourage it as far as doing it, for yourself, there are certain situations in like an interview or a time where you're sitting down with a superior, or maybe, even just like someone at Lambda, where they're going to want you to manually parse your JSON. They want you to be able to read and pick out the things that you want and then construct a model file based off of them. So those tools are really good for checking. They're not recommended or encouraged for doing it for you, because it just like kind of ruins the point, right? I know that you guys will be much better off if you can manually parse JSON and then check it with those tools rather than never learn how to manually parse JSON. Does that make sense with everybody? Okay. So if you ever see those tools, you know, be careful of them is what I'm saying. All right. Sweet. Let's talk a little bit about what we want inside of this. So I'm going to start really basic, and you guys will see how you can change your model files to do different things for you really quickly. Right now, let's just start with, let's just worry about their name. Let's just worry about getting the person's name, because that's what we definitely want in this cell. So how am I going to declare this name property inside of our struct?
Let name of type string.
Sure. Let name be of type string. Okay. We'll come back to this in a little bit. We'll give it a test and see if it works out for us. For now, we can kind of say we've configured a model, and this will kind of take care of the basic things that we need to take care of here. What I'm going to do at this point, because we've made kind of a landmark step in our app, is I'm going to make a commit. So you can see I'm just using GitHub Desktop, but there's files that have been changed and updates to be made. I'm just going to say configure model object, because that's kind of what we did. We also did a lot of like UI stuff, storyboard, but the main thing I want to know about this commit is that I configured the model object. Go ahead and push that up. If you're using terminal, this will do the same thing. This is just my favorite way of making commits. Sweet. Okay, so we made a commit. If you guys ever feel like you're stuck and you need help, or you have hit some errors and you need a fresh project, you can go and find my commits and then just download a zip and keep working from there. That's totally viable as well. Okay, so we've made our object here. We haven't really talked about how we want that object to be represented here in our views, but we definitely need to make some sort of networking method to make it happen, right? So let's go ahead and make our controller that's going to manage the information that we get from the API for us. So command N. I'm going to do just a Swift file for this. And then there's a lot of different things you can call this. It really doesn't matter, whatever helps you. I think this week we've been making them we've been calling them API controllers for a lot of the week. So I'm just going to call it API controller. So we've got our API controller. It doesn't have any code in it yet. We definitely want to make a class for it because we want to use this later. We want to reference this later. I'm going to say class API controller and then just open it up for us to use. Okay. Command B just to make sure everything's looking sharp. If you guys hit Command B often, you'll notice that your simulator runs quicker, and you'll have to wait less and less for every time that you have to like actually run the app and test that it's working. Okay, I actually put this in the top level and it's not where I want it. So I'm going to just drag it down so it's inside of the project. So it's in there, and then I'm going to make a new group from selection, and then this is going to be our model controller. It's going to manage all the work that deals with our model object. Everybody good so far? I think I can only see like 3 of you, so I'm not sure that everyone's here. You don't have to turn your cams on for this. I'm not worried about it, but if you guys are ever stuck or anything, just let me know because I can't like readily tell right away. Okay, so if we come back to the model object, we'll know that we're going to get back these results, and they're going to come in the form of an array. So they're going to be an array of all of our user objects. So I already know right off the bat that I want to keep those somewhere. I want them to exist somewhere within the controller so that I can access them, especially because we're going to use a table view controller, and table view controllers are heavily reliant on arrays. That's how the information is easily displayed is if it's in an array. So kind of the end goal here is after we run this networking method and we get these results back, I want to put them in an array to use. So how am I going to set up this array of users?
Bar users of type array user.
Perfect. We don't have anything yet, so I'm just going to leave it blank. And then once we get information, we can go ahead and throw it inside. Okay, cool. Now, I gave you guys a base URL I'm pretty sure that's the same one I want to use. I'm just going to type it out here anyways. Base URL. And then every time we use a URL, we want to make sure that's really explicit that it's of type URL. Because if you just give a string, Xcode can run some functions that will be smart enough to look at a website via a string, but we want to help it out as best we can. So we're going to make sure it knows it's of type URL. We're going to open it up, and then it's going to give us a bunch of options. We're just going to use the basic string one. So URL of type string, and then we can give it the string inside. And then here is the string here. Throw that in. I set it to 15. If you guys want to change it, that's fine. But I'm going to set it to 20. So basically what this is this is giving us the web domain of the random user API. We're going to access the database through the API endpoint. And then it asked for a couple of just specified options of, hey, like what kind of format do you want it in? If you read the documentation, it talks a little bit about this. Most APIs will have a little bit more thorough explanation of how to use the endpoints, especially the one tomorrow that you're going to use. So don't worry too much about those. Plus, if you get stuck tomorrow on which base URL, remember, use your Insomnia, and you can also message me, and I'm happy to provide you with the right base URL just so you know, get through that. We'd rather have you like start networking than worry about a dumb string that maybe has like one character off or something. And then it's asking for some results, and I'm just going to say, give us 20 results. Don't give us 5,000 because that's too much. Oftentimes, especially in our next couple lessons, we're just going to force this. We're going to force unwrap this. The reason why this is okay is if the base URL is wrong, we want this to crash because we don't want it to run all the networking code if the URL isn't even the right one we want to go off. So we're discouraging the use of the bang operator generally. This is a circumstance where it's okay. There are safer ways to unwrap it, but we actually want it to crash if it's not the right one. So this is totally fine to use. Okay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about closures, because I think closures are probably the hardest thing that you guys will go through in the next couple of weeks. You're going to write a lot of closures, and they're going to be confusing, and they're going to trip you up, and that's totally fine. I'm going to teach you a little trick that's going to take care of a lot of like what goes on inside of like a closure, like the tuple itself. And this is a variable that you can use that you can just throw in so you don't have to go back in and type this information. So this will be a new thing to you. If you don't get it right away, that's fine. It's like boilerplate code that you can just copy. But we're going to say type alias, which this is just like kind of like a declaration or like a constant that we're going to use. We're going to call this completion handler. This is how we want to handle any sort of closures that fail. And then what we're going to say is this is the generic way that closures fail. So we're going to say, like, if we happen to get an error, hop out of the closure, escape the closure, get away from it, so that if we run into an error, we don't keep running code that we don't want to run. You'll see what we're going to use, where we're going to use this here in just a sec. So if you have questions, totally fine. Hold on one second. Now we're going to go ahead and make a function that's actually going to perform this search for us. So you guys can name it whatever you want. If we were going to get users from an API, what do you guys think would be the best naming procedure to use for this?
Get user.
Sure.
Get user.
Let's say let's get users, because we're going to get multiple ones. We're going to get an array of users. So we're going to say get users. And then let's go ahead and create the closure. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call completion. Sorry, not call it, but set up the parameter for completion when it happens. And we're going to, like Spencer said today, and you know, in past couple lectures that we've done, we usually do escaping closures. And what that means is, you know, if we happen to run into a snag, get out of the function, escape the function. Don't continue to proceed trying to decode data. In smaller apps, it's not a huge deal, but when you start making like these big apps that network with a lot of data and information, you're going to want the function to quit early on so that you don't overload the simulator, your computer, or the actual device that you're running it on. Okay, so we've got the escaping closure there. And then here we can call our type alias, which is just our completion handler. So we're saying, hey, if it escapes, if there's an error, get out of the function, like void out of the function, get away from the function is kind of what's happening here. If this is still like something you don't understand quite well, that's totally fine. This is, you know, it's not a big deal. You'll get really good and see why this is used later down the road. Now what we're gonna do here is we're gonna set this equal to a closure and just kind of follow along here. Because I don't even always know exactly how to explain it the very best. But basically what this means is we're gonna pass in some sort of information or some sort of action is going to happen inside of our closure. And this is what we're gonna do when that action happens. So if you guys, if anywhere from like completion on doesn't make sense to you, that's fine because it won't make sense until you really get into more networking stuff in a couple of weeks. For now, this is kind of how we're going to set up this particular get users function. Everybody good so far?
So is that just a shortcut, basically making a completion handler, or should we do it the way that they do it in the lecture, or is it just the same thing?
Up to you. It's going to be this. It's going to work the same way. This is just shorthand. So if you start writing a lot of closures and making a lot of networking code, you're going to want to type alias so that you can just type that in. It's just kind of like if I click it, it just kind of works as the same thing. This is what it ends up being, is we see an error and it escapes out of it. It's just a fun little trick, a boilerplate code to know. You guys can totally make a code snippet out of it because you will use this type alias down the road quite a bit. If you don't today, not a big deal, but yeah, I know that for sure if we do it this way, we're gonna get the result we want. So yeah. Okay, cool. So we've got this function, but how do we actually get in contact with the API? What needs to be done?
Set up the URL.
Yeah, we've got the URL set up because we've seen in Insomnia, when we hit this and we hit 20, this gives me pretty much all the information I'm looking for. So we know that our base URL is like pretty solid. Like our base URL gives us what we need. But how do we actually make some sort of connection between our Xcode project and the API?
Do you append?
We're not going to append. We've done this a lot this week. We've done, it's called
let user URL or whatever we're trying to access URL equals base URL. And then like he said, then you do the appending path component.
Close. We don't need to append because appending path component means, you know, we add something onto the base URL. This is fine. We're good with our base URL. This is going to get us everything that we need.
Oh, the URL session?
Exactly.
It's a URL request, right? No.
Yeah, we're going to use URL session.
Okay.
And then URL session is going to get in contact with the API and accomplish some sort of task for us, some data task for us. So we're going to do URL session dot shared, just like we've done. And then we're going to start with a data task. And we can use a request or we can use a URL. We've got a URL, so we can go ahead and just use a URL. If we were to modify the base URL, you will do this tomorrow with different endpoints. If we were to modify it, we would use a request instead. So whoever said something about a request, you're on the right track. It's just kind of a different circumstance. We've got a URL, so we're not going to complicate it any more than we have. What we could have done is we could have just said, this right here is our base URL, and we could have appended this stuff onto it if we wanted to, but we're not going to because it's just extra work for us. So what's the URL that we're going to use here?
Base URL.
Yep. So we got our base URL. Okay. And then URL session asks for us to accomplish some sort of code. So we're going to accomplish some sort of code inside of here. Now, I should have let it autocomplete, but basically what we've done this week is we've asked for some sort of data. Normally we'll get a response, and then we'll see if there's an error. We're not super worried about the response. We haven't been this week. You'll see it more later. But we're really only worried about, hey, are we going to get data, and are we going to get an error, and how do we want to approach those if we get them? And then in, do you guys know what in does?
Not really.
In is like an open bracket. It's a lot similar to this. It's just saying like, in this next thing I'm about to write, I want you to do this. So it says, hey, we're going to look for data and maybe an error in this next thing that's about to happen. So let's go ahead and handle the error first. I'd rather get the error out of the way so then we can get to the good stuff with the data. So we're going to say, if let there be an error, if there is one, if it exists, we want to make note of it. We want to see some sort of like information about that error. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say nslog, give me a printout. This is just a fancy way of saying like print out this information for me. nslog comes from Objective-C. And back in Objective-C, they didn't use print. So this print that you guys use is new to Swift. Well, it's not new, but it's a Swift feature. But nslog existed in Objective-C. Later in the course, you guys are going to write Objective-C. So right now, you guys are technically writing a tiny little bit of Objective-C, which is kind of fun. But we're going to just say nslog.
Is there any other difference between nslog versus print? Because I remember Spencer saying that
Yes.
he prefers nslog to print.
Yes. So nslog actually makes track of them in your system. So it will specify like the time and the information. We can get a lot more out of nslog. It's almost like a journal of what happened when the error went down. Whereas a print statement is only going to print at that exact moment the error happens, like what the error is. So nslog is a lot more detailed and provides a lot more information. You guys don't know exactly how to get into the information quite yet, which is fine. But nslog is going to give us a lot more. Okay, so we're just going to say, hey, nslog error getting users. And then that's not really enough to like tell us what the error is. This is more of a description of when this error happens. So we're just going to string interpolate the actual error there. And this error comes from here and is trailing from this error. So this is the error we're looking for. It's saying, hey, if there is an error, print it. So if that's like kind of Greek to you guys, that's okay, because a lot of this is boilerplate code. You're going to use this quite a bit. I want to ask, why did we use an if-let versus a guard-let here?
Because you're not unwrapping.
We're unwrapping. We're definitely checking to see if something exists. But why wouldn't we want to use a guard-let here?
Because we don't care about the error outside of the scope.
True, yes and no. The biggest thing here is that we don't care if there is or is not an error. Whereas if we're going to go ahead here and say, this is our data, we're going to ask, hey, guard-let data, because we absolutely need data out of this function. If we don't get an error, totally fine. But if we don't get data, we're going to be sad, because data is like the whole reason that we're making this task happen, right? Like this is our users that we're going to get. Our data is going to be our users. So that's why we didn't use a guard-let here, because an error could be nil. We could totally not have an error, but we're going to be worried if we don't have data. Does that make sense to you guys? Hopefully. Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. So we're going to say, hey, if we get data, we want to see some information happen. Actually, I want to do an else. So we're going to say, hey, if we get data, great. If not, this is what I want you to do if we don't get data. So we're going to nslog again, and this will just be a similar thing. We're going to just say, and this is like boilerplate code too. We'll use this quite a bit. No data returned from data task. And there's a lot of errors going on, sorry. But this is an explicit, very informational error. So we don't need to like string interpolate and add any more information. If we end up seeing this in the nslog in the console, we'll just be like, cool, we know that we didn't get data back. It'll be really clear of like why the function failed. Okay, and then if we don't get data, we want to get out of this function. So we're going to call completion. And what we're going to throw into this completion statement is just nil. Don't worry about too much what goes inside of this completion yet. there does have to be a parameter that you pass in. And so that's why we're passing in nil. We don't really care what the parameter is. We just want to get out of the function. So we're going to call completion. And then we always have to return if we use an else statement. You guys with me so far? If that didn't make total sense, that's fine, because this is a lot like you're going to be doing this over and over again because it's boilerplate code.
So, like, I understand that, but why aren't we using a do try catch?
We're going to right now. You're right on.
Oh, okay.
We were just check. This is our like check. This is, you can skip all of this if you want to, and you can totally jump into the do try catch right away. The reason we don't do that is that it's not good code practice to start like assuming that we have things that we don't know for sure yet. This is a way to be like, okay, do we have an error? No, great. Do we have data? No, shoot. Okay, let's do something about it. If we do have data, let's do something about it. So you're right on it, Donovan. So let's go do. And then this is the kind of the syntax is we're going to do some sort of try, and then we're going to do some sort of catch. And this is kind of the syntax of it. Okay, so I would say the hardest part about the do try catch is the try. Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish inside of this block? Because do is just saying, hey, now that we've got this stuff, we don't have an error, we've got data, what actually needs to transpire here? So it's really hard to know what's like the try. Sorry, someone said something.
Aren't we trying to decode the data?
Exactly. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to try to decode the data here, and I want to give it some sort of place to live. So what I'm going to say is let new user, because that's what we're going to try and decode, right? We're going to get some sort of like information. And then we're going to say try. And I think you guys have done this several ways. You've like declared a decoder before. This is just the shorthand way that I prefer to do it. I just say JSON decoder, and then you make an instance of it. And then it has this method inside called decode. And so inside this decode is like what we're actually trying to get out of the JSON. So we've got like, if the data works in this function, we're going to get a JSON object. But we want to take that JSON and turn it into our model. So this is where our model comes in. Now, do you guys know, we've got like kind of two structs in this user object, right? Which one needs to go in here? Which one is going to be our type that we're trying to decode?
We're gonna have a string right here, aren't we?
We did a string earlier today, but we've already made a model because we're gonna kind of start to like filter out this JSON of what we exactly want. This JSON isn't just a string. It's the very first item is a string, but then inside that item is an array, and then we've got a bunch of dictionaries inside. So you're right about getting a string to be the first value. More specifically, we've kind of already queued it up as this results.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So what we're going to actually decode is our user result, which if you look at the JSON, it's the very top level item here is our results, because we want to get everything inside of this so we can use the information. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say user result, and it always asks for .self. That's just like kind of a natural part of it. What that is referencing is the data in the JSON is going to become user result. Don't worry too much about that quite yet. And then what's our data here? What are we passing in as data?
The data above.
Yeah, the data that we made sure we had. We're like, we need that JSON. So what's happening here is we're saying we need a decoder that's going to decode the JSON data and make it into our user result. In other words, just this results list, which is an array of users. You guys will see really quickly how this is going to work in just a second. One thing I always like to do right away when I've set up some place for this JSON to live once it's been converted into Swift is I like to print out what it's actually going to be. So I'm just going to say print the new user. That way, when I run this code in the console down here, I can see exactly what I'm getting from the JSON. If I'm not getting anything, then I know that I did something wrong up here. But if I get some information, I'm like, sweet, like the network request worked. I can do whatever I want from here. Okay, so if I option click and I go over this new user, this is of type user result. So be aware of that. It's of type user result. Now, we made a place for users to live. So how am I going to get this new user to live inside of this array? What do you guys think?
Append it.
Append it? Let's try. Okay, so what I'm going to say is users. So we'll say users dot append because it's an array. And then we've got a new element of new user. Let's see what happens.
So you're actually receiving back an array. I don't.
Exactly. That's why types are so important.
Array to an array.
Types are so important because you might get this back and be like, sweet, let's add it to the array. But if we check this, this is of type user result. Because we got this JSON, which is a big list, and the big list has a bunch of users inside. So instead of appending this big list to what is already a list, why don't we just set it equal to that list? So what we can do instead is we just say users is equal to new user, and our new user has a property called results. We made that. It's an array of users right there. So if you guys
a little clear, your return variable is new users, because you know you're getting an array back. It'll be, well, it doesn't have to be any, but
yeah,
it's probably going to be more.
That's probably like a better way to reference it, right? Put new users. Now that we know what kind of type we're getting back from it. And then this is going to yell at us because it's like, hey, I need the self because we're referencing it inside of a closure. That just is kind of what happens. So instead of appending one user, what we're doing instead is we had an empty list and we got a list back. So we're saying, hey, let's just make this empty list be equal to the list that we got back. So now, instead of this being empty, we got all of this JSON in our list. Hopefully, is kind of the plan.
Hey, Mitch, I think I kind of missed the part where you explained user result dot self in that parentheses. Like, what is that doing?
Are you talking about this right here?
Up there next to decode, user result.
Oh, I might be the
too
wrong guy
much?
to answer this.
Okay.
It's a tricky concept. It's just referring to the list that we, I don't know. It's the model that we already have made. Generally, this will ask for .self every time you reference a model that you've created. So I don't have a perfect answer for you yet. I will look it up and let you know. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to reference self there.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to wonder, like, how did you get the JSON into the array based off of this? Is it from that self.users right there?
Yeah. So this right here, we're going to decode some data. So we ask it to take some data that we've already gotten, and we give it the format that we want it to be in. So we want it to be in this user result because in the JSON, this first thing that we get is an array, and it's called results. So in our model object, this is what we set up user result to be.
Got it.
Does that make sense, Will?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, let's do our catch. We'll get through the code, and then we can actually test it so that you guys can see what's actually happening here. So in our catch statement, this is going to be a lot of the NSLog again, but we're just going to say NSLog, and then we're going to say error decoding users. And then we'll just pass in the actual error that we get. And you guys can make your error messages anything that you'd like. In my experience, as far as learning and then seeing other code, a lot of developers follow this same pattern of like error getting, no data returned, error decoding. And you'll kind of see that as we go along through the lectures. But feel free to write whatever error you feel like will indicate it to you best. Best case scenario is that you never see your error message because that means you did it right and everything's working. Okay, And then here we're going to call completion as well, just to say, hey, if we got an error, we need to get out of this function. And here we're actually going to call error in the completion. It'll just indicate what kind of error we're getting for us in the console. Okay, sweet. I won't explain why this also has to happen because frankly, I just do it every time. And one time I forgot to do it and that's why my app didn't work. But you do have to call completion after you finish whatever you're trying to do.
So do we not have to type return after completion error?
There's not an else statement here. So whenever you have an else statement, you need to return out of that conditional. But we didn't set up an else statement here, so we don't need to return. Okay, and then Spencer's talked a little bit about this, but every time you guys make some sort of closure, like networking method with a data task, what is the thing that needs to be like the final line of code?
Dot resume.
Dot resume, exactly. Dot resume. Basically what that's going to do is just going to say, hey, actually do the data task. Like continue to do the data task as many times as you need to. Run the data task. You know, it's almost like hitting enter to check a web browser or to go to a web browser. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a run to see if it will work for us. The only problem is we are not calling get users anywhere. Otherwise, it would work. So what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm just going to commit. Whoops. I'm going to commit because we've kind of set up a skeleton for networking method. So configure networking method. And I'm going to commit this up. And we'll take a break here in a second because we've been going at it for like a full hour. Okay. So I committed that up. Now this function, we put a print statement here to see if we actually were going to get anything out of the new users. This function is not going to do anything unless we call it. So I'm just going to call it in our table view controller in the view.did_load. Now, how do you call a function that lives in another file?
Get a constant?
Yeah, we need to actually make an instance of our class that we made. We have to say let API controller be an instance of.
Not in the class. You're actually in the class.
Sorry, what's that?
Okay, circular. Oh, no, never mind. I misread.
Oh, you're good.
Sorry about it.
You're good. So now that we've got an instance of this API controller, we can actually call the functions that are inside of it because they don't actually do anything if they live in the class. This is just like their place that we reference them from. So we come back to this table view controller, and then we can say, hey, let's go ahead and call this function. Okay. So what we'll do here is we're going to say API controller, the lowercase one, right? And we'll use dot syntax to access what's inside of it. We've got all these cool properties and things. Now you're going to see two options here. You'll see a get users, and you're going to see a get users completion. We're going to want to use the one with the completion because we can double tap it or hit enter and actually run some code inside. So when this code runs, we want to see something actually be produced. 9 times out of 10 when you're using a table view controller, we will just call table view reload data. Just because if we get information back from this data task, we're going to want to populate the table view with it. Okay, so this error we can just use as error. And then we're going to want to just catch again. We want to be as protective as possible. So we're going to say if let error equals error. Give us some sort of indication of it. Oops, sorry, ns log. And then I'll just say error. I don't even know what I want to say for this error. Error performing data task. Just because it's a different error than what we've written previously. And you guys can probably see why making enum for errors is really good, just because you can kind of pre-populate it with different types of errors that might happen. So we're gonna say, hey, if there's an error, let us know what it is. Let us know what kind of like problem happened. Ideally, we don't get an error. So, all right. And then we've done this a little bit this week, but generally when you make a networking call and you're doing something on the background is what we say, we want to put it back onto the main thread, which is just like a fancy way of saying that our app is smart and it has a lot of layers. Networking is traditionally done on a layer that's behind the scenes. So if we finish the networking task, we want to put it back where like the magic's happening on the app, where the actual like stuff is going on. So this is just the way to produce that, is that we go back to the queue, which is the main queue. We haven't talked about concurrency yet. We'll get there in a couple of weeks. I think it's in 2 weeks, yeah. But just go along with this for a bit, and I can try to explain it if you're like really hung up on it. But this is generally just the way that we take the networking request that's happening under the hood and then put it actually onto the top layer of our app where stuff's happening. So now it's on the top layer, we're going to say, hey, table view, reload your data again, and we can see if you had some information pop up. It's going to yell at us here because it probably wants us to do self. Yeah. It's just saying like, hey, refer to the actual user table view controller file when you do this. But that's the way that we're going to call our networking method when we run the app. And we'll do that in the view did load just because that's like a really quick, easy way to force a method to happen right as soon as the app is launched. Okay, let's go ahead and run the app. Remember, we've got this print users. And like I said, tomorrow, use this in your do. Once you get some sort of information from the JSON, you want to print it out somewhere so you can make sure that you're getting what you want. Okay, so I'm going to run this, and it's going to print out information for us, hopefully, and we'll see what kind of pops up. And if you guys are still a little lost, it's okay, because we're going to come full circle, and at the end, you're going to be like, oh, I totally see how this is working.
Are we going to be using a bearer token in this?
We're not going to use a bearer token, and you don't have to use one tomorrow.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now we got some sort of error. You guys haven't done a lot of debugging yet, but tomorrow you'll at least be able to kind of see something like this to know that you are decoding the wrong thing. Your Xcode project, when you set it up, is going to expect to decode some sort of JSON information, and the error it looks like we're getting here is that we're not actually getting the right information from it. So it says error decoding users, so that's the error that we set up. It says something about type mismatch, there's a decoding error, coding keys results is nil, and the string value is 0. There's a lot of information going on along here, but I'm gonna look at the stuff in the quotation marks where it says like name is wrong, results is wrong. And the biggest indicator for me when I see something like this is I have to come back to my model object and make sure that I'm getting the right stuff out of my model right here. So I think now is a really good time for us to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to show you what's wrong with this, because Austin, you were on the right track making this constant, but our JSON doesn't exactly match it. So let's take a 5-minute break. If you guys want to spend your break doing other stuff, great. If you want to spend it trying to figure out why this is wrong, I'll leave the JSON up so you can see kind of maybe what the issue is. This is the JSON that we're getting out of here. Okay, so let's take a break. We'll try to be back 20 after and try to look through and see what's maybe wrong with this, if you can. Why is this working?
Hey, Josh, what do you think it is? Those brackets right there after name?
Um,
I assume that's what he's going to say is the problem.
Yeah, I think that's it.
yeah, name is not a string. Name's a dictionary.
Yeah, it has like
Or a
several
string.
things.
It
So
looks
it's like,
like it's an array.
It has a title first.
no, an
and
array
last.
would be a square bracket. Curly brackets is a set of dictionary terms. You know, key. Um,
Oh yeah, you're right.
So he's going to open up a dictionary underneath that name constant, I suppose. Would that be a
I need like a name struct, and the name struct is what
yeah.
is in the user. I'm still working on the afternoon project.
Yeah, I had a lot of trouble with it, but right before, like, I'm almost done with it. I think I'm up to like the last step part of the last step.
Yeah, I'm kind of done writing the code. I'm just troubleshooting some crap I had with the. Oh, I see what he did. Trying to figure out what he did with that top label. I guess if it was a pre-existing, he fills in the existing job title. He did. But I just blew away all my constraints because I didn't like the way it was showing up.
Yeah, I did mine a bit different from the lecture.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, guys. Hopefully everybody's back. I heard a little bit of chatter here and there about like what potentially is like the holdup with it, or like why we're not decoding the right information. And you guys nailed it right on the head. I don't know if everyone was listening, but I know that Austin and Josh were talking together about this a little bit, and I think Mark was there too. But what did you guys have to say about this particular part of the name?
Oh, well, Josh pointed out that it's opening some sort of a library, and I tried creating it myself, but it's saying that I can't compute a let, so I tried a var, but then again, Josh I think made it more clear. You may have to do a struct for name to add in the title first, last.
Yep, you are exactly right. That's exactly what we're going to do. So if you look, name, when we make it in our model, we're telling it that we expect some sort of string. But when we look at the JSON object, it's not a string. It's a dictionary of strings. So Josh's suggestion of making kind of an underlying file for this is exactly what we want to do. So instead of expecting string, let's just make a new struct of something called a name. And we'll say this is name. It also needs to be decodable because everything that we're going to do with the JSON needs to be decodable. Same reverse way, if we're going to, push something up, post it, we want it to both be, codable no matter what the struct is. And then if we look at the JSON object, we've got a title, a first, and a last. Right now, I only really care about maybe the first name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do first, and it's going to be a string. And the reason why this let was wrong, if we look at the JSON, result is always going to be this big list that we get. But var could change. And actually, I'm not sure if this needs to be a var as well, but I think we can test it and see. But regardless, we're going to know that like the names could change. A lot of things could change. So we want to declare these names as variables. The result list is going to be a finite list when we make the network call, but the name could vary from person to person. So all we care about right now is getting inside that dictionary. Does anyone know the verbiage that we use to call when like something lives inside of something else in a JSON?
Casting?
Close.
Embedded.
Nope. It's called nesting. This is called nested data. So if you look, this results has nested data inside of it. The data lives inside this results key value. And then inside of this name key value, we've got some nested data that lives in here too. So we've got the title, the first, and the last. Now, Austin, to kind of answer your question, we don't need, going back to the very start of this, we don't need to put in title, first, and last. The cool thing about Swift and JSON is that we can kind of parse, that's the word for it, we parse out what we want, and we can leave out information that we don't need. So now, let's see if this will work for us. Let's go ahead and run it again now that we've kind of configured it the way that the JSON expects to be decoded. Pull this up here. Okay, now we're getting some information. Let's pull it up. So we asked it for 20 results, and I'm looking and I'm seeing this is probably 20 results. I got a random user object. I got the name from inside of it, and inside that name lives a first name sort of string, and we got it. We got the information. So this is why it's so critical to put some sort of print statement inside your networking call, because if you never get to print out some sort of result that the JSON decoded, you know that there's something wrong with your base URL or like whatever you appended to it, or maybe you ran into some data issues. But now we know everything above this line does exactly what it needs to do. We've decoded the JSON data. Now it's just up to us to do something with it. And so it lives in this, array now, so we can actually do stuff with this. We can do whatever we want with it, really. Did someone have a question? No, we're good?
No, that was my dog.
Okay.
I'm moving myself.
Okay, sweet. Now we've got this array, and because we've declared this array inside a different API controller, we can use it now. So a couple of things about table views. In this particular lab, we don't need number of sections. We know that there's just going to be one big long list of users. We do need number of rows and sections. How do we know how many rows that we want in our table view?
Count the API controller.
Okay, API controller.count.
.users.count.
Yes, we're going to want to access that array that we made. And then we'll use count. Sweet. Okay, awesome. So we've got that. Hopefully, since we asked it to give us 20 names, we're going to get 20 rows when this happens. But we've got to set up the cell so that the cell gives us some information when this comes to, when push comes to shove, we're actually going to get some stuff inside of the cell. Okay, so this is all great and fun. We can hop into this, but if we never tell it which cell to go to, nothing's ever going to happen. So do you guys remember what we named our cell?
User cell?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just user cell. It's best to just go back and check. I'm not going to because I'm pretty confident we named it that, but it's good to know. Okay, and then to start to get some information to populate inside of this cell, how do we access that users array? How are we going to get individual user items out of it? We do this a lot, actually.
The index path.row.
Yeah, we're gonna have to access that index path. And the way that we're gonna do it is we're gonna say, hey, there could be a lot of users, but we're gonna say, hey, let a specific user be, living inside the API controller, because inside that API controller we have an array of users. And then just like you said, we have an index path where we can access that specific row. So then we're saying we are supposed to have 20 users inside of this. There's supposed to be 20 living in there. So let one particular user be factored into each row. The index path is like the address where we number them. And then the row is the, where they can live in the table view. So the first item in the array should go in the first row, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? It's like more of a refresher, I would say, but index path can be kind of like difficult to conceptualize. So now that we've got a user, one thing to come back to is I think I just did, yeah, it defaulted to custom. So let's go back and let's just do a basic cell, because right now our model only gives us a name, just like simple information. So let's just give this a basic cell. So it gives us a title, it gives us a label for free, and then we can go ahead and access that label here. Okay, so we could say cell, and then access that text label that came with the basic cell. And then we have to reference its text property, because text label is of type UI label, and text is the actual string that lives inside that label. Kind of like a sticker on a car, like it's actually the actual writing that's on the sticker. And then we're going to set that equal to what? What do we want to be inside that text label?
User
dot name. Just that?
Wouldn't it be the user in the array?
Not quite, because we've declared a user as being whatever, it'll go and find it for us with this index path.row. But look at what type name is. We have like no type for it. That's because back in our model.
Should probably do string interpolation and just put those. Oh, you just described the first. Never mind.
Oh,
yeah.
I think you need another dot and then first.
Exactly, because now we know, option click, this is a string. So we're accessing our user from the array, so like one specific user. And then in our model, every user has a name, and every name consists of a first name. And like we said, when we printed out in the console, we got everyone's first names. So let's go ahead and give this a run. Ideally, we're going to see first names, 20 of them, all the way down the list here. Come on. There we go. Fingers crossed. Awesome. There we go. So we took the JSON data, we decoded it to fit our model object. Then we took that decoded array of our model object and put it into the table view. That's just what happened there. Can anyone see right away like something that we'd want to fix about this just for user experience?
Maybe add a title.
Or like a title for like the actual thing. Yeah, we could totally do that.
Font size?
Yeah, font size. But like, what's a big like a big grammar indicator that's like something we definitely want to fix about this?
First letter capital.
Yeah, we want to capitalize people's names. It needs to look sharp, right? We want it to make sure it looks good. Does anyone know how to capitalize a string?
Probably has its own function for that, or method.
It's super easy. Dot capitalized. That's it.
Wow.
That just takes the very first letter of the string and capitalizes it. Just like Josh said, it's a cool method that just takes care of it for us. So now we go and run it again. And then this is going to pull up. And every first name is now going to be capitalized. Just like that. So that's like a really good, sharp way to make sure that user experience is good, right? We want to make sure like things are capitalized and grammar looks good and spaces are accurate. Okay. Now, I'm going to get to questions here in a second. Let's do one last big step because this is kind of like the big incremental thing of what you guys are going to do tomorrow. You're going to take JSON data, you're going to make it fit your model object, and you're going to display it, and then you're going to be able to have to take it from a table view and show a detail about it. So, from this from this table view, we want to select this and see more about Lionel based on the other information we're going to get from him. So how do we pass information from one view to another view?
Segue.
segue, prepare for segue. So segue is like the action that actually happens, but prepare for segue is the method that we're going to use. We actually don't need the information here, so don't worry about this. I'm not going to delete it right away because we might come back if we have time. But we're just going to use prepare for segue to take care of this. I'm going to clear out this commented code just because it's kind of messy. Another big thing too is, we've made a successful working function of the app. So I'm going to just make a little commit for it. So we configured the table view data source methods, which AKA are just cell for row at and number of rows in sections. So now when I come back to my commit to see how I did here, I'm like, oh, cool, this is the part where the table view was working and I got it to do what I needed to do. Okay, let's talk through prepare for segue. And it's kind of like, and my other students have heard me talk about this before, but it's like a mailbox. Prepare for segue is like sending something in the mail. There's a couple of key points that we need to have. We need to have like an address. We need to have some sort of mailbox to send something to. And then we need something to actually send. So let's think kind of with the end in mind. We're going to send this somewhere, and it needs to have a mailbox to live in. So what do we need to do to pass our user object to another view? What do you guys think?
You need to get their VC object.
Yes, we definitely need to actually declare the view controller. That's like the address, right? We need to like have an address. A big thing first is we want to check the right segue. We're going to say if segue identifier is equal to, and I think we just called it user detail, right? So if it's equal to user detail, if we've got the right segue, let's make some stuff happen here. I'm just going to go back to the storyboard to double check. Yeah, it's called user detail. So that way the compiler is like, okay, cool, I've got the right segue. Now that it's going to the right place, we need to make some stuff happen. So yeah, this is where Josh, what he says comes into play. We're going to say guard let our user detail view controller equal segues destination. We're going to downcast it as our custom user detail view controller. And if that's not it, we need to return. If that's not the correct one, we need to return. You guys with me so far? Good so far?
Yeah.
This is like the address. This is the address part of sending some mail. Another thing we need to do too is kind of along with the address, we need to kind of like write a zip code. We need to like send the right number with it. So we have to give an index path. We selected a specific spot on the table view and we want to send that information that lives there. It's like sending the zip code, I would say. So we're gonna say guard let index path equal, we're in the table view. We've got a big list of rows in the table view, and we need to find the specific row that we selected. So we're going to say index path for selected row, else return. Because if it's wrong, if it's not the right one, we don't want to do anything with the wrong information. So what's happening here is we filled out the address. We're saying, hey, I want to send something to the user detail view controller. And I'm sending it, and it's more of like the return address, I would honestly even say. It's like, it's coming from this specific spot in the table view, in this specific row that was tapped. Okay, now we're going to send something in the mail. What are we going to send?
The controller?
We could send the controller, but the controller kind of did the work we needed it to do. It did the work that's uploading, but we want to pass, when we hit a specific name.
No, we type in the view controller, the detail.
You want to send the user.
Yeah, we want to send a user. That's what we want to send here. So what we're going to say is let user equal, and a lot like what we did up here, we got to reference the specific array and that spot in the array where it lives. And if you look here, we already set up the index path of what we tapped. So what we can say is API controller dot users. So our list of users, and then index path is the row that we tapped on. I'm sorry, the specific part of the array, and then the row that we tapped on. So when we tap on a user, let's say we tap on Mark. I'll kind of do this side by side so you guys can see. When we tap on Mark, we're saying, okay, first things first, when we tap on Mark, we want to make sure that this is going to the right place. So let's check the segue identifier as user detail. Sweet. And then we want to make sure we got the right address. We're going to send it to our detail view controller. And then we also want to make sure that the next view knows where we got this information from, which is from Mark's specific row. That's what we did here with table view.indexPath for selected row. And then what we're saying is there's information that lives inside Mark's cell, and that's the exact same as the number that it lists in the array and then the row where it lives. So this is like a messy concept to conceptualize, and I think if you just do it enough times, it'll just click if it hasn't already. So if it's still a little iffy for you, don't worry too bad. But you'll see here in a second how we're going to send it on. Okay, there's one thing that we're missing here. We've got a user declared, but we don't really have a place to, we have a place to send it to, but we don't have a place to have it live in. We don't have a mailbox. How do we do that? Because if we look here, we've got this user and it's yelling at us, right? Because it's like we haven't used this user detail VC.
In an optional user object.
Yeah, there's nothing inside the user detail view controller that says anything about our specific object that we're trying to send. So what we're going to do, just like you guys said, we're going to make an optional user object that's a user, and then that is going to be what we send on. So now when we hit this, user detail vc dot user, oh, I need to build, sorry, that's probably why. So if I hit Command B, let it build here, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit user detail vc dot user. Now it comes up. We can set that equal to this user that we just created. In other words, this is the mail we're sending, and this is the mailbox, and it's going to get it now. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. All right. Now that we've got this information, we can assume that if we tap on Mark's cell, we're going to come to the next view, and inside that view, we can have access to all the information that lived in Mark's cell from before. We've done this a couple of times, but whenever you send something in a segue, there's a method we can use to check that something actually got updated. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Like the update views?
There is an update views. We'll make one. That's like a custom method that we'll use to make things happen. But whenever we send something in the mail, there's a way to check that the mail was actually received.
Guardlet.
What'd you say, Josh?
Guardlet.
Close. That'll be on with it. It's a did set.
Oh, the did set.
We're going to do a did set. And the did set is going to do something whenever we get more user information. So it's kind of like going to check the mail and checking to see if it's actually there. So it's like, hey, we got mail. What do? We open it or we do something with it. And then inside the did set, this is where it comes to what you said, Mark. Inside the did set, we're going to make something happen. So it's like we get new user information. We want to do something about it. That's when we're going to make an update views method to do something about it. So we'll call that update views whenever we get new user information. Now, all the information inside the cell that we tap on, the only thing we have right now is just the first name, right? Because that's all that's we've set it up to do. So all we really want to do is display information with the name. We haven't made a label yet. I'm lazy, so I'm just going to do title and set it equal to our user's name, and then their name has a property called first name. and before we capitalize that. So I'm just going to capitalize it again. You guys will see here in just a second. Oh yeah, we need to guard let. We need to make sure we actually have it. We're going to guard let user equals user, else return. So that's where this comes into play, what Josh said, is like we actually do want to check that a user was received here. We need some sort of way to say, hey, we actually got a user. Don't put in information until you definitely have a user. Okay, cool. Now, once we run this app, what we're hoping for is we have a table view with information about all these users. We tap on a cell, prepare for segue sends all the information inside of the cell to the next view. And then if we got the right information, update views will hopefully make the title of that view, the navigation bar, be the user's first name. So let's give it a run and see if it actually works. Okay, let's click on Dylan. My computer's a little slow. There we go. Dylan's name, that information that we passed in the segue, became the navigation item's title because we set it up with update views to be that way. Is this working for everybody so far?
Yeah, mine works.
Oh, Brian, I'm just now seeing that you said did set in the chat. You were exactly right.
Mitch, can you show me your user table view controller one more time?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Is everybody good so far? Anybody stuck? Because right now, like the app is finished and we did what we needed to do. I'm just going to show you guys how you can kind of manipulate your model objects to display different information depending on the JSON. So if you're like to this point, you've done what you needed to do. We're going to do all the cool stuff now, like the stuff that you're going to need to know for tomorrow other than this, of just like parsing JSON. So if this is working and everyone's good to this point, sweet, because now we're in like a great spot that things are just going to be like aha click moments for you. One thing I'm going to ask you to do, the title works for this just because the title appears before the actual view does in a long roundabout way. The navigation controller exists throughout the whole app. Whenever you guys pass information to a new view controller, I'm going to have you do this. You're always going to guard is view loaded. We got to make sure that the view actually has information inside of it. And then after the view has appeared and loaded, we can make those changes happen. You'll see why, but generally if you guys are passing things in your segue and you'll see this error where it's like, I found nil when trying to find when unwrapping an optional or something like that. It's generally because your view tries to load, but before that happens, this whole did set is going on. So the did set may or may not have information before the view loads. So the reason why guard is view loaded is great is because it says, okay, the view is loaded. Now you can do the did set. Now you can update views. So it makes sure that you get all the information that you need before the actual app runs. Long story short, if you guys aren't getting information popping and it's saying something about a nil, you probably need to guard your view and make sure it's loaded. The other thing I'm going to do to ensure that this happens is once super view load happens here, this is just another way to ensure that the view gets changed. So if that was all just like a blur to you and that doesn't make sense, that's okay. But tomorrow or going forward, if you guys are ever trying to pass something in a segue and it's saying something about a nil, you probably need to do what we did here with calling an update views and making sure the view is loaded. You'll see why here in a second, but just like a good like benchmark thing to know. All right, I'm gonna make a commit and we're gonna say we modified our detail BC and app is displaying info on table view and detail view. Sweet. The reason why commits are so important, one, it just helps you like mark your progress. But I'm sure you guys have noticed GitHub has a contributions list. And your employers are going to be, this is the way they're going to check that you actually code. It's kind of like a lazy way to check that someone's actually codes. But you're going to want this to be like as green as possible. I've done a lot today outside of just this project too. But like the more green, the better. So that's why like commits are great. Doing them often is great. And your employers will just be really appreciative of you doing that. So that's why I'm committing as frequently as I am. So if you're not, please do be. That's a big thing. Okay, cool. Now, let's start to do some fun stuff. We've got this user's first name, but that's like great and all, but like what if we want an email? What if we want a phone number? What if we want some more information about them? This is where a model object is just so helpful. It really just takes care of stuff for us. So I want you guys to pick something from the JSON that we want to add in next. What's some useful information that we could get out of this that you'd want to add in? Other than the first name.
We could add, the last name, email, login, or wait, go back up. What does it allow us to do? Their title.
What is what?
Oh, their title, first name, last name.
Let's do that actually, because that'll be fairly quick and easy. So if we look at the JSON here, we already got the first name. So as part of our user struct, we can also add in a last name. And by the way, tomorrow you're going to be doing a lot of this like nested data. So I feel like this will be really good practice for you. So now let's watch this. When we run the app, we still have that print statement that's going to actually like print stuff out for us. So now that we've got this last name included in the JSON struct, we should see both information decoding from the first name and the last name. So let's see what comes up with that here.
But aren't we only calling the first name?
What'd you say, Austin?
We only did dot first. So you already have it pulled up. Never mind.
Yeah, so we added it into the model. So you guys can kind of see the beauty of the model object here. The way that we set it up here with decoding this whole list, then we can go into our model object and just add things that we want. And then the JSON is smart enough to just, or not the JSON, the decoder is smart enough to say, okay, your model includes a first name and a last name. So I will get those out of the JSON for you. So now we've got a last name. Let's go back and modify so that this table view controller isn't just the first name, it's also the last name. So how do I add this in here? Because right now we've only got the first name. How do I add the last name in together as well?
Could you do a comma and then read that entire thing? Or could you just
I think it needs to build first. Hold on one second. We can try this. I don't actually know that I've ever tried this. It's not populating, so I'm guessing that's
a plus sign or no?
Plus sign? Yeah, let's try it. Let's try that. Okay, we'll give it a run.
It doesn't look right though.
It's
probably
really
one
have to
space.
put spaces between there? Yeah.
Yeah, you guys will see really quickly, like, you know.
It's all going to be together.
Yeah, we've got to mash together here. So what can we add inside here to
some blank parentheses.
Yeah.
Space. Yeah.
Here we go. And now when we run it, we should see spaces. And then when we tap, it's still going to say first name here. So let's go ahead and modify that kind of in the same way that we did this. I'm just going to copy and paste this because we're going to do virtually the same thing in the detail view when we set the title. So if I just copy and paste what we did here, run it again, we should see when we tap the user cell, the title of the detail view would be their first space last name. And there we go. Just like that. Did you guys see how easy it is? We made one small change in our model object and we got all that extra information.
Yeah, so like in a detail controller, would we just link up the labels and then we would add that to the label?
Yeah, let's do that next. So like let's pick, now that we've got the last name, let's pick another thing from the JSON that we want to see in the detail. What's another like good, you think of your contacts app, what would be some other good information to have in here?
I mean, maybe an address or their age.
Yeah.
Phone number.
Let's start with like email, phone number, because those will be
Security number.
like things to have. So the most important thing when you guys look at JSON is try to look at what's like at the next level. So we've taken care of the results level, and you just want to make sure that like if information exists inside of a dictionary, we've got to nest it out, kind of like we did with the name. We made a name struct, and then we got the first and the last name out of it. So would you guys say, looking at this JSON, do we need to make a separate struct to get someone's email?
No.
No, right? Yeah, we don't need to because it's not nested inside anything beyond this results layer. So what we can just do is say var email is just a string, right? Because when I come back to look at the JSON, email looks like it's just a string. So we've got our email here. Let's run the app, see what prints out, and see if we get some information about the email. And I wish I had a faster Mac, and I don't.
That's
Gary.
Nothing will appear, correct?
Let's see. It does. We got an email.
On the simulator?
Right. We haven't queued it up to do anything other than print out in the console, right? So let's go in and let's set up the detail view to show us some information about that. Sorry, I gotta move this down because that down like bar is in the way. Okay, I'm gonna drag out a label and put it in our detail view. And just so you guys know, like you're not obligated to be here any longer than any point. So if you guys are hung up on anything, I will always post the completed project and the completed video. If you stick around, I'm gonna show you some cool stuff that'll help you tomorrow, but don't feel obligated. Okay, so Spencer showed you guys today this cool little thing, but you can select the label, and then if you hit Option, you can drag out the exact copy of that label. You hold down Option and pull it out. So what I just am gonna do is I'm gonna pull out 4. I'm gonna pull out 4 of those, and what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna make them like really explicit what they are. So this one's gonna be email address. It's gonna hover over that other one. This one's gonna be phone number. And I kind of made those disappear. Whoops. Let's queue these guys up so they work. Okay, and then these other labels, we want them to be the actual information because these 2 labels on the left are gonna be kind of like our placeholders for info. And then the one on the right is gonna actually have the information about the thing. Good night, Josh. Thanks for your help tonight. All right. So let's put these guys in a stack view. So those 2 are together. Let's put these guys in a stack view so they're together. Sweet. I'm just gonna constrain this guy. That first stack view with the email, let's do 20 on the sides and then 20 from the top. Give it some nice space. And then this second stack view, same thing. Actually, let's just put these both of these stack views in one big stack view. Let's make like a super stack view. We'll just put them together and we'll constrain the whole thing. Stack view. Oh shoot, never mind. So we've got the original 2 stack views. I just Control Z to get rid of the constraints. As an alternative, you can go into the constraints and just delete them. But I've got these 2 stack views just exactly how they were. I'm going to select them again, make them a stack view, and then I'm going to constrain just the whole thing. That'll just be a lot easier than trying to do each one individually. And if you guys didn't constrain them perfectly, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Instead of just saying label, I'm going to put number. Oh, sorry. I'm going to put email.
Can you actually do that one more time for me, if you don't mind?
Yeah. You mean like the whole
you
stack?
Just do, you have 2 stack views. I did 2 horizontal stack views and then embedded one in the above stack view. That's not how you went about this?
Yeah, but yours should work either way. The constraints, as long as, you know, at runtime, they might run off the page and I can help you fix them, but that's not super like pertinent to right now. If you want in a second, we can take care of it. But right now, I don't think it's a big deal. Okay, sweet. So we got these. Now, to actually get information to come into this email and the number, what do we need to do?
We need outlets.
Outlets, perfect. Okay, let's open up the detail view. Option click. And then let's go ahead and click. I'm just going to do it on the left-hand pane here, just because it's like kind of a pain in the butt to like find the label and get it right. So I'm just going to drag from this navigator into our file. This first one I'm just going to call email label. This second one I'm going to call right there. I'm going to call this one phone label. Okay. So those are queued up and good. Now, there's one other thing we need to make happen before these will actually, you know, show up here. What do we need to do? We've got outlets for them. But we need to change that label to match whatever our user's email is. What do you guys think?
Like an enum?
Nope, not quite.
Really match? Or like...
Because all we're doing is we're saying, hey, we've got an email label. Right now it says, I think I just said email. Yeah, so we've got an email label. Right now it just says email, but we want it to change depending on what the user's email is. We already got that information from the JSON here, right?
Okay.
So how are we going to get that to change in the detail view?
Don't you do the label.text equals
in the update?
Yeah, inside update views, we're going to say
email
label dot text is equal to what?
User
dot email.
There we go.
Just like that. Let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Austin, you might hit some sort of like constraint issue, and I'll help you with that in a second, but should be all right.
Oh, no, I just went about a different way. I wasn't sure if you did it that way.
Yeah, as long as it didn't yell at you and you don't see any like red constraint errors, you should be fine. Okay, let's go ahead and hit Ruby and see what pops up. Sweet, we got Ruby's email. Let's figure, you know, this whole like user experience issue that's happening where her email is getting cut off. We can tackle that in a second, but we've got nothing for her phone number. So how am I going to get information about her phone number in here?
Same thing, phone label.text.
Is equal to user dot what? We don't have anything yet. How do we get phone to populate here?
We didn't add the phone to the user.
Yeah, there's no like actual phone indicator here yet. So before you guys ever like put in information into your JSON, just come back to it in like Insomnia and make sure you just can infer what the type might be. So we come down here, and does phone look like it's an integer or a string?
Is it double only with decimals?
A double can be an integer as well. It's just a different type of number.
It's a string.
It's a string. Yeah. Quotation marks, right? Quotation marks are a great indicator of a string. So I'm just going to say bar phone is a string. Let's run it again. Oh, yeah, we didn't do it. Phone. Oh, you guys, my heart just dropped. I thought I wasn't recording. I am, but I didn't see that I was. Oh, I almost lost my mind. You guys see recording in your top left, right?
Yeah.
Okay, praise the Lord. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and click now and see if we get information. Sweet, that's like not really a phone number, but we don't really care because this is an API that gives us random stuff. But like we got the phone number showing. Do you guys have this pulling up for your?
Yeah.
You got info? Cool. Does anyone know how we can tackle this issue where the text is running off the page?
Change the spacing in between.
Yeah. I'll show you a faster way even. Let's go ahead and click on the actual, so like in each stack view, we've got some information. And there's like a tug of war that goes on when you have a stack view with more than one item. And basically the way that you can pick which thing wins the tug of war is this ruler. So you click on the thing, I guess, yeah, you're gonna have to do them both, but click on the first item in the tug of war, and we're gonna come down in the ruler where it says content hugging priority and content compression resistance priority. So a good way to remember is anything that has a higher priority will take up more space. So what I do, just to be safe, is whatever I don't care as much about, or whatever is shorter, like the email address, I will make it a lower priority. And then the thing that I want to see, I will make sure that it's a higher priority. So if you didn't see what I did there, the email address label that actually doesn't change, we pre-typed it to be that way. I set all of its values to be one less. It's like one less than 250, one less than 750. And then the email label, the one that I care about, I set it to be one above. Let's go to do the same thing with the phone number just in case. I'll just take this down to 259. We'll do this one to 749. I don't know a whole lot if everything needs to be changed. I just do this to be safe. I'm sure an instructor could pop in and be like, do it this way, but this has always worked for me, so I hope it'll work for you guys too. Let's go ahead and run it again. Hopefully we can select a user that would have a big, long email address, and we can see how it kind of will fit now. Okay, let's click Georgia. Sweet. Now, we don't really care about it saying email address, but we do care about getting all the information in. So we've got it there, right? Sweet. Okay. There's one more thing that I want to do with you guys. You're going to need it for tomorrow. Everyone that left, too bad, too sad, but I was saving this for last for a reason. I want to show you how to take an image from a URL inside JSON and turn it into an actual image that you can see in your app. Spencer like briefly sent you guys the code snippet today. This is going to be like the magic way that you do it. Okay, so let's go talk about the JSON and what the actual photo inside looks like. So I'm going to scroll through here until I see something that's related to like image or picture or profile, gender, name, location. I don't care about those. Time zone, email login, nope. Date of birth, registered, phone, cell, picture. Okay, picture right here. So we've got a picture item, and it gives us a dictionary of strings. These are actually URLs to be specific, but this is going to give us a string of different things. So if I were to incorporate this picture into my model object, how would I go about doing it? What do you guys think?
Would it be the same thing as a string?
Yes, but can we just say var picture is equal to type string? Is that going to work for us?
No.
No, it's not, because if you look at the picture, or if you look at the name, we had to get a dictionary out of that to get the actual name information.
Mm-hmm.
So
So set up a new struct?
Yeah, let's set up a new struct.
So
Instead
does this count as like unnesting when you do this?
yeah, this is like this is called I don't know if unnesting is right. This is called parsing. This is what we mean by parsing JSON data. We're going to make a struct now for picture. Got to make sure that's decodable, right? We actually need to take the JSON data and put it into a usable format. And then if we look back, we've got 3 different types of pictures to choose from. I'm going to show you guys 2 cool tricks here. Let's start with the thumbnail for the first one. So how would I get our thumbnail to be in the, in our model object?
Would you use an enum and access the raw value?
No, because look, it's just a string. It's just a URL. If you look at our name property here, we did the same thing. Instead, we just got, the strings from inside the name struct. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to say var, and then we're going to take the, I can't remember if I want to do a URL or not. I think we can just do a string and we'll probably be okay. Actually, yeah, I do want to do a URL. So let's do thumbnail. And remember, it needs to be spelled the exact same way. So if you guys spell any of these key value words wrong, your JSON won't know what to get. Spelling is so critical.
So it's like a segue?
Yeah, it's just like, that's what key value pairing is. It's just like we give a key to a value, and if the key matches, you can have the value.
Okay.
Yep. So we got to make sure we get this thumbnail, and this is going to give us, it looks like a string. I'm going to say it's a URL, and I'll tell you why in a second. So we've got this, and we get a URL from it. I'm going to show you guys something really cool. It's going to go by kind of quickly, but I think it'll like be a fun little like new thing for you to do. Every basic cell, so not custom cells you'll have to set up separately, but every basic cell actually comes with an image inside of it. So I can say cell dot, and it's called image view. So it's like a little like picture frame inside of a cell. And then inside the picture frame is actually an image. So every basic cell comes with this like hidden picture frame and a picture that can go inside of it. So that's kind of how you access it. And now we've got this user dot thumbnail, well, it's a picture, and then it's a thumbnail we can get from it. Whoops. But we're going to run into a problem. So it says, cannot assign value of type URL to type UI image. So we've got some like type confliction here. We need an image, but all we're giving our project is this URL.
Can you force it with the UI image on the outside?
Yeah, there's a really easy way to do it. I'll show you guys. If you guys were stuck and you never knew how to do this, this is exactly how I would Google it. I would come up here, I would come to Google, and I would say URL to UI image Swift. It's like super like poor jargon, bad context, whatever. But I would come here and see what kind of results come up for me. And there's probably a really good way that I could go about, and this is Objective-C, so I don't want this. If you guys ever see some stuff that says a bunch of like NS, that means it's Objective.
Also with the later releases in the softwares, and there's stuff that they could do differently. Like Jonah was saying, even months earlier, there's a lot of stuff that he couldn't do that they can do now. So sometimes the answers you get will be oftentimes conflicting, as from what I've found.
Exactly. So there's like a ton of different things that change over time. See, like this second result gave us something like quick and easy to use. It says, okay, this is a string, and we can take a URL from a string and get some image data, but we already have a URL, right? So what I'm looking at here is like, okay, someone is making a property. They're doing like this try data contents of image URL. So I'm like, maybe this is the right spot to go to. Let's just give it a try. So I'll say something like this. I'll say, let's let our image data equal, and like we saw in that example, someone said try. I'm not going to bang because that's sketchy. I'm going to do try question mark, because like maybe we'll try. And then data. And this is just me typing it out, wondering what might come up. So now that I can see, it says initialize a data with the contents of a URL. So I'm like, oh, maybe I could take a URL and turn whatever is at the URL into data. So then let's try this. Let's try and take our user.picture.thumbnail, because that's a URL, right? If we look at the JSON, this is just a URL right here. So we'll take the thumbnail, and then UI image has this really cool property. So we say UI image, open parenthesis. And it's got all these different things that we can do. And there's one that says data. So it says initialize and returns the image object with the specified data. So I'm just going to pass in our image data. And it says value needs to be unwrapped. Okay, let's guard-let this thing then. Else. I'm going to cut a corner here because we're like going over time. This isn't like a great idea to do, but if you ever have an else and something like return doesn't work for you, return's not going to work here because it's just not going to work. There's a fun little thing called fatal error. And fatal error is just like, hey, this is a big error. And it basically just means like something happened that we didn't want to happen. So make something, give me some sort of error. It's not really good practice, not something I recommend doing, but for the sake of time, that's what we're going to do. Okay, so what we did here is we said, okay, our thumbnail is a URL, but we need this to be an image. So we did like a double conversion. It was kind of crazy. We said, hey, if we have some, if we can get some information out of this URL, let's make it into data. This try is a method that's just like, hey, try to make something happen. Try to make this data appear. So then we fed it contents of our URL. This is our big URL. And then if it actually worked, we were going to say, hey, turn it into a UI image. This will be fun for you guys to see. Thanks for sticking around so long, guys. This is going to be like a big help to you tomorrow, so I think you'll be glad you waited and saw this. Now all their names pop up. Pretty cool,
That's
right?
cool.
Ah, and then so if we just want to display that in the detail, we would just drop a UI image view and then link that to there.
Exactly.
Cool.
So then that'll be the last thing that we do before we break up here. But I'm going to just do an image view. Rainbow wheel. My computer's working so hard, bless its heart. There's actually a stack view, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it inside, if I can. There's that line right there. I'm going to drop it inside our stack view. And it's like a little smaller than I would want it to be. If nothing else, I definitely want it to be square, right? Because most profile pictures are square. Let's just have it be the same width as the height. That's kind of tiny. Let's do 150 and 150. That'll be like our little profile picture. And the constraints are kind of ugly. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna add a missing constraint. Just to like be like, hey, just pin this where I put it. Okay, now if I ran this right now, we're not gonna see anything inside, right? How do I get the actual profile image to populate inside of here?
Outlet to detail.
Yeah. Outlet to it. We gotta make the outlet to the detail view. So I'm just going to do it from the left-hand pane here. There's the image view right there. So I'm going to make that outlet. And I'm just going to call it image view. Okay, now that we made the outlet, I don't need the assistant editor to be open. I'm just going to close it off. And now we should have the user information. We should have that thumbnail. We can kind of do the same thing we did here. So let's just kind of copy and paste this conversion that we made, because we're going to need to, reconvert it into a UI image anyways. we'll just copy and paste what we did. And then I'm going to say image view image. And whenever you think of image view, think of a picture frame. And we need to put an actual picture inside of it. So image view.image is equal to, just like we did before, UI image. It's like our cool way of making images happen in code. And we're going to try our contents of data, image data. And let's go ahead and build. And now, in theory, since we have those pictures popping up in the table view, and we're doing this prepare for segue correctly, we should see, come on, in the detail view, their actual profile picture. Don't be dumb, come on. We might have broken the API because we were all making network calls. Just kidding, there was only like, we were only each making 20 network calls, so it's not a big deal, but. Okay, there we go. Let's check Aiden's. There we go. It's kind of ugly, but we at least got a picture. Does anyone know why it's so blurry?
I'm assuming the resolution.
Yeah, it definitely goes back to the JSON. So what we got was
the size of the image.
Yeah, we would probably rather use the large size, right? So let's just easily add that into the user. Our picture struct can also have a large object. That's just a URL, same thing. Let's go into the detail view, and instead of using the thumbnail, let's use the large picture. And now that should look better. Is anyone like super stuck? Is this just like blowing over your head, or do you guys feel like you've grasped this pretty solid?
I just have a quick question on the Garlet image data.
Yeah.
So when the data is, you're kind of forcing the user.picture.large into a data type, right?
Yeah.
Is user.picture.large a URL at that point before you change it?
Yeah, because if we look at our struct here, this is our like big JSON data. We get one particular user out of it. Every user has a picture. We made a picture struct, and every single picture struct has both a thumbnail and a large. So by and large, every user has a picture thumbnail and a picture large.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just because
Yes, that makes sense.
That's the way we set it up. That's the way that JSON was configured for us. So that's the way that we set it up.
So how would someone tomorrow who didn't watch this go down, how would they figure this out? Like if I was just thrown into the sprint challenge tomorrow, do they expect people who don't know it just to Google and hopefully find how to do the image?
That's how I did it in the sprint challenge. I was just like, oh man, I can't get this picture to show up, and I got a little nervous and just tried to Google.
So are you talking about to the side of on the table view, or are you talking about on the detail?
Both.
So is the one on the table view more for aesthetic purposes, sort of like a stretch? Is that what they're going to have?
I'm pretty sure you have to do it tomorrow. I can't remember, but it shouldn't be hard to do. This was just like something cool I wanted to show you. There's like basic cells are the way to go rather than making a custom cell, because basic cells always have an image inside. You can use an image view inside of it, and like that way you don't have to like drag on an outlet and make a constraint and then make the outlet to it, and it's just, you know, it's just that much less work that you have to do by using a basic cell. So it's just, this is just me trying to convert you guys to using basic cells as much as you can, because they're cool.
So what should we call our last commit?
Oh yeah. Oops, that's Insomnia. I'm just gonna say complete app functionality. Because now I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm pretty cool with what everything this app does, and sure. So that's kind of the gist of it, you guys. I know that there may have been a couple of things that you're just like glazed over a little bit, but as a reference, this project will be a big help to you tomorrow.
Are you going to share the link to the GitHub project?
Oh yeah, it's in iOS 9.
Okay.
It's an iOS 9 channel. It's called JSON, what is it? Sorry, iOS 9 after hours. Was that Percy that just said something?
No, that's Andrew.
Oh, Andrew. Okay, sorry. Here, I'll tag you in it, Andrew. Oh shoot, I tagged you in the wrong thing. Whoops. But yeah, I'll also post the completed version of this project too. Just so that you guys, can have this. You don't have to go to my GitHub to get it. But it is there in case you want to see like each commit that we did and all the code that was factored in. That might be helpful just to see like how you can add in different things to your model object. Basically, the biggest point I wanted to get across to you guys today was your model object is super malleable as long as your JSON is decoding correctly. So if you can set up that decoding to work properly, then you can go back into your JSON and just tweak it, or sorry, your model and just tweak it like we did. Because at first, all we had was just that results, name, and first name. That's all we had to start with. And now, like, you guys have added all these cool extra things into it where we can see an image, we see their name, we can click on it and see a profile picture and their email address. And it's just like very fleshed out and well done now. And it wasn't like, it was minimal work. Wouldn't you guys say that it was like super quick work to add in each of these things? Like it took almost no time at all to do. And you can imagine, in a 3-hour time crunch when you're trying to get your sprint challenge done, how helpful this will be to just like come in and do this. So what questions do you guys have about what we did here?
Could you like do a flyover on how you got the JSON to conform to our model object again? Like that very first important step.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to pull up the JSON here. This is just an Insomnia. I've got the correct base URL, and it does take a little monkeying around sometimes with the API to find out what you're going to want to get from it. But once you have an idea of what the JSON is going to come out to be, in other words, this information, what we did first is we looked at the very top level. And I have to look at the key value that's going to be the very first thing I'm going to get. So I looked here and I said, okay, I need to definitely have some sort of value for results. And then I looked after it and I said, okay, this is an array. Like I know for sure, this is a bracket. So this is going to indicate there's an array of information that I'm going to get. So to set up that very first thing we said, and you could call this whatever you want. You just got to make sure it's decodable. We said results because that has to match our JSON. Right, that's right here. Results has to be the same. And we know that that's of type something of an array. And so because we got that array, we can name this user whatever we want. It's just that the JSON is going to give us back a bunch of information. And so the very first thing we did is we probably shouldn't have started with name because it was like a little more complicated. We had to like make a struct for the name and get all the information out. But if I just wanted someone's email, all I would have to do is just say var email is of type string. And then my model would be perfectly able to handle the decoded JSON information. Does that kind of answer your question, William?
Yeah, definitely.
It's so like JSON parsing is hard because you guys haven't had a lot of practice doing it and because no two JSON files are the same. Like every API is different. It's going to be set up differently. Tomorrow, your API is going to have an array within an array. So don't let that scare you. It's just like, rather than this being a name, it might be like an array of names. And then you'll get a lot of information rather than just one first name. So don't let those things scare you. Just look at the JSON and see what kind of the brackets are indicating, and you'll have no problem. Because if I look at something and I see an array, like a square bracket, I know it's an array. But if I see a curly brace, I'm like, oh, that's a dictionary, which is a bunch of string values. Or in here, like this dictionary also has an integer value. So it'll just be a good indicator of layers. It's like, I think of it in like Shrek when he says ogres have layers like onions. Each level of JSON is a layer, and you just got to make sure you are accounting for each layer. So like this is our results layer. this is our name layer, and then these things live inside that layer of the name.
So the reason why you put email as a separate kind of layer is because it's outside of name, right?
Yeah, because it's like email is just in and of itself, it's just its own property.
Got it.
It doesn't need, like, maybe they had multiple emails. So if they had multiple emails, it would say email : open brace, and then it would be like personal email, work email. Like, it could have had that, but it doesn't. So because it's just really simple, it's just a property with a string value. That's exactly what we did right here.
What's tomorrow's API?
You already know it. Don't talk to me about it.
I just feel you could share it with the few who stuck around, Mitch. That'd be nice.
Well, I will leave at the end of this. I will leave an emoji in the not an emoji, a GIF in the after hours chat, and you will see maybe what you're dealing with tomorrow.
Cool. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you guys have any more questions before we close out for the night?
So you said search bar is going to be on it, right? So
Yeah.
just review that. Okay.
Yep. So like reference back to the the Star Wars one that we made, because Spencer did exactly what you're going to do tomorrow, where he used a search bar. He used those delegate methods. So like when the search bar is done typing, then you can get whatever text is out of the search bar and pass it into your networking function. We didn't do that tonight. We just got a big list. Tomorrow, your networking function is going to ask you to pass in a search term. So be aware of that. It's not going to be hard. It's not going to be necessarily harder. It's just going to be a few more lines of code. So if you guys look back at how we did that search term, that's going to be a big help to you. All right, guys. Anything else? Anything else that you want me to go over in this project? We're feeling all right? Okay, thanks for sticking around so long. I know some of you guys are like East Coast. It's pretty late. I'm going to close it up. I'll post the completed project in here. Like I said, use this tomorrow. Use the Star Wars project tomorrow to do your project. You're going to do a great job. I'm not worried about you guys, especially you guys that stuck around this long. I'm going to be around tomorrow during your sprint challenge, so I'm not supposed to help you, but if you're really stuck, maybe I will, especially because you guys spent the time to come here and work on this with me, so I appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Good job, and good luck on your sprint challenge.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, you bet. Let me know if you guys need anything else tonight, but have a good one. Thanks.